is being held hostage by our president.
Air traffic controllers and airport security officers are among hundreds of thousands who've gone unpaid. It started when Donald Trump demanded approval for billions of dollars for his border wall, and the Democrats refused. No one is budging.
Today, we are here to send a very simple message to Washington. Open our government and pay our people for the work they do.
Not far to the west is one of the many federal prisons where officers are working without pay. Some of them voted for Donald Trump, but the shutdown doesn't discriminate.
We might have some folks that see the border security issue exactly like the president. We'll have folks that don't. But what we all see together is that we're pawns in this game, that our livelihood is being used in a political game of chicken. Who's going to cave first? We all feel like that.
And the effects are being felt far beyond just workers not getting their salaries. Other business has come to a halt because of the shutdown too.
It's kind of scary.
Molly's worried her government-assisted rent won't be paid and that she could soon be evicted because of the political deadlock.
I'm very, very upset with all of them on all political spectrums of it. It's just a tit for tat, and it's just, enough is enough. You guys have a home, you guys have security, you have, you're worth millions and millions of dollars. We have hardworking Americans here that, are doing the right thing, and you guys are doing tit for tat. And it's like your people's lives are in jeopardy.
And Molly's worried it all means her 86-year-old father, who lives here, will also become a victim of an increasingly far-reaching crisis. Aleem Maqbool, BBC News in Boston.
Well, earlier I asked our Washington correspondent Jane O'Brien if there was any chance of this political deadlock ending anytime soon.
There's a lot of activity going on, but no sign of any real progress. The Senate, controlled by the Republicans, is planning to introduce legislation that would reopen the government, but it trades border wall funding, this $5.7 billion, for some temporary protection for undocumented younger immigrants. The Democrats, however, have said absolutely not. They've already rejected it, so that's going nowhere. Meanwhile, the House, controlled by the Democrats, is also introducing a draft of legislation, a series of bills that would reopen the government, but with no funding for the border wall. And the Senate won't take up anything that Donald Trump opposes. So the two are still in complete deadlock. This single issue of border wall funding, this $5.7 billion, no one is budging over that. And until that happens, there can be absolutely no compromise. And meanwhile, as Aleem was talking about there, people are now feeling the effects of this shutdown, which is now over a month long, across the country. This isn't something that's just affecting the government in Washington, it's affecting all parts of the country. And the polls are showing that most people blame President Trump, probably why you saw an attempt at the weekend to actually propose something. And there are also concerns that it's going to start affecting the wider economy. Some estimates are that this shutdown is costing the country $1.5 billion a week, much more than what it would take to fund the border wall.
Well, that was Jane O'Brien. In a moment or two, I'll be speaking to a Michelin-starred chef who's been feeding government workers at his restaurants, and also to one of those workers involved about the growing hardships. That's here in a moment or two. China's tech company Huawei has said Western officials concerned about espionage are welcome to visit his firm's labs. But he's also warned countries like America, Britain and Germany that if they continued to limit the company's ability to do business, it would transfer their technology elsewhere. One of the company's executives was detained last December over accusations of violating US sanctions on Iran. Well, I've been talking to the BBC's technology reporter Zoe Kleinman about Huawei's chairman's latest statements.
It is a kind of good cop, bad cop, isn't it? On the one hand, he's saying, look, we have nothing to hide. Come and see the factories, come and see the production process. You'll see that we are not up to anything untoward. On the other hand, he's saying, and if you don't like what you see, we don't care, we're going to go somewhere else. It's quite a confident statement for Huawei to make, especially it's faced such global pressure with many countries reconsidering or indeed blocking it from pursuing contracts with them.
Well, that's where I wanted to go to next, because the backdrop for Huawei is all of these security concerns around 5G, also that arrest of that very senior executive. Where are we with both of those?
Okay, I'll give you a quick summary on both of those. Let's start with 5G. 5G, of course, is the next generation of mobile internet, and it's coming. It's coming in the UK, certainly within the next year or so. It's much faster than 4G that we have now. It's promised to be a much better service. The issue, of course, is the infrastructure. All of the mobile operators around the world are having to upgrade their antennas and their masts, and Huawei is a major player in terms of the manufacturers who are making that infrastructure that these countries need. And now there's concern that perhaps Huawei is a little bit more on board, shall we say, with the Chinese government than it's letting on, and that's giving rise to concern. The thing is, there aren't really a lot of choices. There are a few other manufacturers. You've got Ericsson in Sweden, you've got Nokia in Finland, who also make this equipment, but there aren't loads of them, and everybody needs them. And now to quickly move on to the arrest of the daughter of the founder of Huawei. She has been under house arrest in Canada since last month. She's may be extradited to the US. She's been accused of breaking sanctions, as you said, with Iran. Now, we have heard that the US is saying that it will extradite her. It does plan to. Hasn't given a timetable, but if it is going to act, it has a deadline of the 30th of January to do so.
Zoe Kleinman, let's take a look at the day's other main global stories now. And Zimbabwe's opposition has demanded an end to what it said was the terror inflicted by the security forces during a week of violence sparked by a rise in fuel prices. Responding to an offer of talks by President Emerson Mnangagwa, the opposition MDC called for a return to the rule of law. There'll be much more on this story in Focus on Africa coming up here next. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump is allowed to enforce his policy of banning certain transgender people from the military. Back in 2017, the president announced on Twitter that the country would no longer accept or allow transgender Americans to serve in the military. The technology firm Dyson says it's planning to move its corporate headquarters from the UK to Singapore. The company's owner, Sir James Dyson, has been a vocal supporter of Britain leaving the EU. However, its chief executive insisted the move had nothing to do with Brexit, which he said would have no practical impact on the business. Now let me show you these pictures of an angry worker driving a digger through the doors of a Travelodge hotel in England. The footage has gone viral. It's understood the driver was protesting after a pay dispute with contractors at the hotel. One of those other headline stories, because it has been confirmed now that an Argentinian footballer who just signed for the Premier League club Cardiff City was on board a light aircraft that's vanished off the coast of France. Emiliano Sala finalised his $19 million move to Cardiff from France over the weekend. Rescue workers say they're not expecting to find any survivors. Let's speak to our reporter Paul Heaney, who's outside Cardiff City's stadium. And Paul, tell us more in terms of what the club is actually saying.
Well, news has been filtering through here to Cardiff City at their stadium throughout the day in terms of what's being done to try and find this aircraft. The clubs began this morning by telling us they were seriously concerned that their record signing was on one of two people on board this aircraft, which was due to leave Nantes in France last night and arrive here in Cardiff in South Wales yesterday evening too. It seems to have gone off radar, lost contact with air traffic control around 8:30 local time. Search and rescue effort was launched but had to be halted around 2 o'clock this morning because of poor conditions. Started again 8 o'clock this morning and has been going on ever since. In the last few hours, the club have said they're extremely distressed to hear about the news and that training today was cancelled. They expected their new striker to join up with the team properly for the first time today. But of course, football perhaps playing second fiddle to other concerns here today. The club say they continue to pray for positive news.
Paul, as you were just finishing those last two sentences, the police have confirmed they're suspending the search for the plane. So that news has just come into us. Tell us a little more about the player, because we'd seen the pictures of him signing there for Cardiff City. We saw pictures that he posted of him leaving his old club.
yes, it was a very kind of poignant, I guess, tweet sent out by the player himself saying goodbye to his old teammates just at the weekend there, saying goodbye obviously to join this club, Cardiff City, and to start playing in the Premier League. But a 28-year-old Argentine striker, which obviously attracted interest from around the world in this story today, but he was a proven goal scorer, someone who'd played in France for a number of years, was in the top 2 or 3 scorers, in fact, in France's top football league, which is why he came with such a big price tag. Cardiff City broke their club record fee to sign him, and it's fair to say that fans here were really eagerly anticipating this striker joining up with the manager Neil Warnock and the Cardiff City team this season to try and keep the club in the Premier League. But that excitement, that anticipation today has really turned to one of sadness and sympathy while they continue to wait for news about what may have happened to their recently signed player, who of course only signed on Saturday, and of course the pilot of that plane, which is still missing. Just in the last hour or so, fans over to my right have started laying flowers and scarves in tribute to a player who in fact they didn't even see play for their club yet. Such is the regard he seems to be held in by fans here.
Well, Paul, thanks very much as we look again at those pictures we were referring to, as I'll just repeat that news that was coming in just in the last few moments, that police have announced they are suspending their search for that light aircraft that's gone missing. So if there's any more information on that story, we'll obviously return to it. Now, let's return to our main story here, the partial shutdown of the US government.